Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I'm Ruthie, and I'm here with
Thomas.
And we are so excited to be talking about sex and gender and relationships. Thomas, I don't know when folks will be listening to this, but today is Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Ruthie.
Happy Valentine's Day, Thomas. And I just want to take this opportunity to publicly tell you how much you mean to me and how glad I am that you are in my life, both for this radio show and for our friendship over the years. And I'm super excited to be able to tell you how much I appreciate you in my life for many years to come on this day and others. So thank you.
Oh, well, I want to definitely tell you how much I love you to pieces.
Oh, I love you too, Thomas.
And I think like on a day like today, or whenever you're listening to this, I think it's important that we realize that love comes in so many different forms, and we're so blessed with having loving relationships. And we do this show, and we have a lot of fun doing this show. But we have incredible guest hosts, but it wouldn't be the same without you and doing this with you. So
I'm so happy.
It's having a love fest.
I know. Oh, I should have invited you to dinner tonight. We should do a dinner date soon.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Maybe our listeners can come too.
Oh, that'd be fun. All right. So I'm not paying for it. Thomas, I want to know, what is an intimate way to connect while in a long-distance relationship? And another person sent in the question, how do you keep close when in a long-distance relationship? The distance, the love across the miles apparently is stressing some people out.
Well, before I jump into answering the question, I just want to acknowledge these questions came from the Psychology Society at the University of Guelph. Ruthie and I, along with Dr. Paula Barada, participated in a relationship panel for Valentine's Day, and the Psychology Society was very gracious in handing off their questions to us to then be able to talk about online on the radio show. So. Long-distance relationships.
Have you ever had one, Thomas?
I have. I have had a long-distance relationship.
Just
or
one?
Two. I guess it depends on what we define long-distance by.
And relationship.
In fact, all of these words. Because actually, I think it's rarer for me to have been in a relationship where I've lived in the same city as the person. Now that I'm thinking about it. I wonder what that says about me. But
Do you travel?
I travel, and I think it also says that the world is not as big of a place as it used to be. It's a lot easier to get around. Where I am in my life, I have the ability to travel and get around a little easier than I used to. So I guess long distance, though, for me would really be defined as anything outside of the city you live in. The easily accessible region around you.
So I think that some of my most serious relationships, almost all, maybe all, I would have to think really hard for an exception. So all or almost all of my most serious, most long-term committed relationships also started off as distance relationships.
Oh, they started off that way?
Yes.
Okay.
So the partner I've been living with the longest, we were long distance from each other for something like 4 years. And that was during their undergraduate years, my AmeriCorps Domestic Version of Peace Corps years, and my master's degree years for myself because I'm a little older. The other partner that I live with started off international long distance, and we're kind of bridging that gap now and slowly navigating that whole process. And some of my other partners who are ongoing partners, but we don't live together and never intend to live together or take that step, are all in different cities and different countries. Yeah. But if you, by your definition of out of town, then I'm also thinking of an ex of mine that okay, now I can think of an exception to long distance, but an ex of mine who lived in a neighboring city, and so the commute was an hour-ish. So by those, I never thought that was long distance, but they did, and we actually treated the relationship differently, thinking about it differently that way. I have dated a few local people who are still around, so there are some exceptions, but they're all former partners or very peripheral partners.
So what I'm taking from your experience is that long distance not only can work, but it has worked into primary relationships.
Yes, it's also failed horribly in different instances. Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should clarify. Mine have all burned flames.
Listen, long distance is really wonderful and really hard at the same time. Somebody once told me that basically being in a long distance relationship is sort of like a resort relationship. So you get this intensity and these best case scenario times with each other, at least for a while until you get sick of it. And then there's this longing and this missing, but you get to be a certain part of yourself because you only see each other in certain times and ways. It can be a very sexual relationship in nature because the times you see each other may be highly sexual. For some people, the distance part is highly sexual with phone sex and things like that. For some people, sex just isn't a part of it. That's fine too. But it is, I identified with that resort relationship sort of thing. Not that it's always wonderful. There's a certain longing and a missing and a grieving and a sadness, but the times together were a bit surreal and in that way wonderful. And as soon as it becomes not distance, that surrealness goes away, goes right away.
And that can be tough. It's that transition either from being in close proximity to long distance or going from long distance to proximal. I think a lot of people romanticize that idea of, well, we're long distance right now, but we'll eventually be in the same place and then everything is going to be good. All of our problems will go away because we're in the same city. And that's not necessarily the case.
It's just different problems,
Yeah.
frankly. So the longing and the missing will change, but then you have to acclimatize to the day-to-day life aspects of each other, and that specialness of seeing each other changes, and it becomes special in other ways, but that intensity and that resort quality, it's just gone. There's not really any other way to do it than to keep it long distance. So for that reason, some people purposely maintain things as long distance.
So what are ways when individuals are at long distance to make one feel close in a relationship? Because I think it's one of our questions here, but I think that's one of the trickiest parts to figure out when you're starting a long distance is how do you generate that closeness without physical closeness?
So I think a big thing is to have matching goals around proximity. So I have some partners where we have no goal to be in greater proximity to each other, and we're both on the same page with that, and we both feel great about it, as far as I know. And then I've had other partners where our goal was, this being far apart is too hard. We really want to be closer. We want that relationship escalator, all those things. And so in those cases, it's always been necessary to know when the next time I'm going to see that person is. So at the end of one visit, we have to have the next visit planned, more or less, whether that's going to be a long ways away or short ways away. And also knowing when to expect to hear from them, so commonalities around how often we're going to text and things like that. And then a long-term plan for when that distance is going to be lessened that feels somewhat feasible. So when we graduate school, we're both going to job hunt in Vancouver, or whatever that may be, so that there's some sort of plan or goal for when this will be resolved so that you can look forward to. So you're either on the same page of not making those goals because you don't want that, or you're on the same page with making those goals. That's been essential for me. I can't speak for everyone, but that's been really important to me over the years.
Well, and I think also in that closeness, understanding, what are the needs that each individual might have during that time. So, how often that communication happens, when those goals, all of those parts get to some needs, but also understanding that, well, maybe my need is that, you send a good morning text in the morning, or that I still have sexual needs that are not necessarily satisfied by phone sex or Skype sex, FaceTime sex, whatever platform you decide to use, and by masturbation. And so I would like to be able to have an open relationship during long distance that would be purely physical, non-emotional relationships.
You can never promise something won't go emotional. You can do things to snip things off if they become emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
But whatever your needs are within that, to be able to communicate that to the other individual in order to create a bit of a threshold and say, this is what I'm going to be looking for during this time of long distance, because I can't go without all my needs. And I think being honest with yourself and the other person is quite important from the get-go, or as it emerges in your own self-assessment.
So for me, ongoing communication is important in a distance relationship. Now, the pacing of that is some people I talk to every day. I have some people I talk to weekly. I have some people I talk to a little less than that. But we have shared expectations for that, and for me it does have to be a bit ongoing. Now I do have some partners that I just see at events. I use the word partner maybe too loosely because I tend to use partner really for the closest people. So I have some lovers. I'm not sure what to call them. I have some dates that I have just at events, and we don't really talk a lot between those. But we do then know the next time we're likely to see each other, and we've kind of established that. And there's not the same kind of ongoing emotional connection there. It's more like those old friends where you can be apart for a while, and as soon as you see each other, like, hey, it's you. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. In situations where I want more connection, because they're asking about connection and things like that, those rituals are really important. So face-to-face relationships have rituals, and you're talking about rituals too. The saying good morning or good evening, the sending each other a picture of your lunch, the having something arrive in the mail once a week, like whatever it is that you look forward to that happens with some sort of regularity, because relationships build secret language and secret ritual, or not so secret, but ritual with each other that becomes like their own private worlds. And you still have to create that across distance, or you're going to feel a lack of that.
And in one way of those rituals can be through special events in each other's lives. So not just the Valentine's Days and the Christmases and birthdays, but, if your partner is going for a work presentation and, they've been working on it for a long time, making a note of that in your calendar or a mental note that you'll check in about that after it happens. That's something you would do often with physical proximity. You'd be able to see them after work and be able to have that conversation. Distance doesn't create that ease of a ritual of checking in. Right. So knowing it and putting that effort. Intentional,
it has
absolutely.
To be intentional. And it's paying attention to what your own needs are, because being far apart can trigger all kinds of insecurities or jealousies or whatever that is. And some of it is getting over it, but some of it is also saying, what, if we could do this thing, that would make it a lot easier for me. So if you could, tell me before you go on a date with someone else and not just after, or only after and not before, like that would be easier for me. Or if I know that I'm on your mind in the mornings, it makes my whole day feel better, like you're thinking of me. So that text in the morning makes a difference. Or that, I have a few relationships in which I ask that when we're distant from each other, that they just send me a selfie every day. It doesn't have to be awesome. It doesn't anything. But I like the visual reminder of their presence. I like to see them in some way every day and feel like I'm knowing about their life. So, actually that selfie every day is more important to me than pretty much any other text we could exchange. But I have to not tell myself, or just get over it, right?
Well, and one thing for me that is always a really important ritual is when we remind our listeners that they're listening to Sexually Charged Radio.
I never get over that.
Yeah, Sexually Charged Radio on CFRU 93.3 FM in the Guelph area, or you could be listening to us online at cfru.ca, or streaming us on YouTube by searching Sexually Charged. And Ruthie, I heard a rumor that if people have questions or comments for us, they can actually write in.
I almost started singing when you said I had heard a rumor. They can write to asksc@uoguelph.ca. That's GUELPH. And the wonderful folks at Student Wellness, which is part of Student Affairs, will get those questions and forward them on to us and help us do background research about it. Sometimes they co-host, they do editing. It's a wonderful relationship that we really appreciate having with them. So there's also some creative ways to build intimacy and connection. I'm product reviewing a vibrator by WeVibe called the Wish. I got it because it was like super rumbly and it advertised being similar to a wand, which is hard to find anything that isn't a wand. And I noticed after I bought it that it comes with an app where someone else can download the app and connect with your vibrator from anywhere in the world. So there's all kinds. So these technology things aren't brand new per se, but they're getting like smoother and more common and better functioning and things like that. I remember when I was in undergrad, there was this thing called teledildonics, which somebody tried to introduce. I hope you can just imagine the face I made when I said that out loud, everybody. But it basically, it's like the internet. Someone over the internet can control your vibrator, basically. But that was when everything had wires, so everything changes and grows and stuff like that. So there's things like that. I'm a big fan of people who want to having sexting and having phone sex and webcam sex and things like that too. if people are interested in doing that and have a good agreement with each other and a good trust and safety around those images and things. So there's plenty of ways to have that kind of intimacy too, if that's something that's both people desire. And then just the fun of exploring it. Maybe the app works well for you and maybe it doesn't, but it's a fun adventure you both had together at a distance. There's all kinds of cute schmoofy things. Like you can plan a picnic at the same time and you each pack a food and then you go on FaceTime or whatever it is in your two different locations and you can see where each person has picked a picnic and you can talk about the foods you're having and you can emulate a lot of face-to-face stuff at a distance these days.
Well, and I think it's important to think about that intimacy level beyond the sexual satisfaction and into that relationship building, because a lot of long distance relationships I've been in or have heard about from others, they often became stagnant when individuals just kind of got into a routine of, well, this is what I'm doing, there wasn't that same excitement or adventure of doing new activities together and creating new memories together. It was always this, I'm telling you my memories, rather than jointly crafting new memories together. Memories.
Well, relationships face-to-face or distance are a constant negotiation of who am I as an individual versus who am I in the context of this relationship. But that can be even more complicated to do at a distance because to a certain degree you do have to keep being an individual. The other person isn't there. But if you don't become a being within a relational context, then the individual side will win out and you'll end up disbanding the relationship because you haven't invested or grown enough relationally. That investing and growth can hurt though, because they're not there. You're growing with somebody that you can't hold hands with. So it is difficult and it is committing to a bit of misery, frankly. Although this sounds terrible, but face-to-face relationships are also committing to a bit of misery because nobody gets along perfectly all the time. It's different miseries, I think, and it depends on what you have a tolerance for. All this said, some people, long distance will just not ever be for them.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, just know it. Don't fake it. Don't say, like, if you just know in your heart of hearts, then either set it as, you know what, when we see each other, it'll be, hey, I missed you, you know, or just say, I can't, you're wonderful. And if there comes a time when this distance isn't a distance anymore, I'd love to reconnect and see how we're doing, but it doesn't work for me. And that's okay.
And for some people, long distance is actually the best option for them. That the way their life works, maybe they travel a lot, maybe they work extensive hours and so can't commit to the physical presence. And so by having someone who's away from them in a distance standpoint, remove some of the guilt of not being physically present.
Sure.
So it can be a really helpful or healthy way of developing a relationship. But, you know, it's a unique style to get there, and it takes a lot of learning, it takes a lot of practice, and you have to be willing to accept some mistakes along the way. There are going to be those hurdles, and you know, working together, hopefully you can overcome some of those things. But don't write it off just because it's distance. A couple of my relationships involved me requiring a passport to get to the person, and yours as well. And you know, it's really easy to see that as a barrier, but I think it's also part of the excitement in certain ways. And it doesn't make them any better or worse. They're just different formats.
It's an extra adventure to use that passport to get in the United States now. So think about the adventuring you can do there.
Oh, we're getting political now, Ruthie.
I didn't say it was good or bad. I just said it was an adventure. Please don't kick me out of the country. So that assures I won't be welcome back there again. Should we move on to a different question before I make my life harder yet again?
I think that's a great idea. What question do you want to do next?
What do I do if I feel my partners and I are sexually incompatible? Was submitted to us.
Ooh, that's a good question. So my first inclination to this question is, what does someone mean by incompatible? Because being sexually incompatible can mean that, you know, the parts aren't the parts that you normally would have expected for yourself. And so you think that's incompatible, but then maybe you start to realize that, oh, I'm not attracted to genitalia, I'm attracted to people.
So it could be that the genital structure is not what you anticipated. It could be that somebody's genital size is not what you anticipated, or how they use their genitals.
it could be that the behaviors are incompatible. So what really turns me on is actually a major turnoff for someone
So
else.
like our kinks are not working together, even if they're fairly mainstream, or they could be not mainstream at all. It could be that the desire levels are discrepant. Somebody wants a lot more or a lot less than the other person.
I can't think of more sexually incompatibility.
It could be that the skills are different, right? So some of it could be, you know, I like oral sex, you don't like oral sex. Or it could be that, you know, I get that your partners have been really pleasured by these things that you do with them. It's not working for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's important for anyone, and recognizing that there are different ways that people can be incompatible, but that also means that there are lots of different ways that people can be compatible. Mm-hmm. Because you might have one of these incompatibilities, but on all the other ones, you're super compatible.
Sure. Yeah, I have noticed that whatever it is that people are not getting in their love life that they wish they were getting, or that they're getting too much of and they wish they were getting less of, they get really fixated on that point. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a deal breaker point, or sometimes it's an abuse point or something like that. And so that can be realistic to be really fixated. But there's also people who will tell me about all of these wonderful things about their relationship and their love lives and their sex lives, but this one thing isn't happening right, you know, and it's like they've got this tremendous fear of missing out for their whole life. If I don't find someone who's a 100% sexual match for me, I'll be frustrated and disgruntled my whole freaking life, and it's all over, and I've got to do this thing. And that, you're never going to find your 100%. Mm-hmm. It'll feel like you're 100% with some people in the initial throes and lust of the relationship, but once those brain chemicals calm down, some ways yes, some ways no.
So, you know, what can you do if you're feeling that your partner or partners are sexually incompatible? I think recognize in yourself, and then if you're comfortable, communicate that.
Yeah.
I think in my experience of sexual incompatibility, what I was feeling, what was weighing on me, suddenly changed completely once I said it to the other person, and they said, yeah, I'm feeling the same way, and this is actually what I'd love. And I was like, that's what I would love. And then we realized we actually were compatible, but it was because we were too nervous to say that we weren't getting what we wanted and we weren't liking what was happening.
Figure out your deal breakers. If it is an incompatibility, does that mean the relationship is incompatible for you or not? And nobody can tell you that but yourself. Maybe your partner doesn't want to deal with your disgruntledness either, so they might actually have some input in that. But, you know, and being a deal breaker means, are you going to stay resentful? Is it going to impact the quality of the relationship? Or can you honestly just let it go and focus on something else, right? And I think sometimes we get really anxious about the idea of letting it go and focusing on something else. And sometimes that comes with age and experience. So a non-sexual example, if I may. My being a vegetarian is really important to me. One of the people I live with now is not a vegetarian at all, which means they also are using our cookware and stuff like that for, like, our meaning communal cookware and stuff like that for preparing meats. And there's like the smell of meat stuff in the house, sometimes in the fridge, in the freezer. They're very respectful about this. They're super, super respectful. They strive really hard not to ick me out and stuff like that. But you know what? I just have to let that go and get over it. And I knew that when I invited them to be a bigger part of my life and the invitation was mutual between us, that I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to have to let this thing go. And I might ask for some accommodations around it. Like, there's certain things, if you eat them, I might want us to be seated at a table where I'm not staring directly at that thing. Like lobster is really hard for me to watch somebody eat because it's kind of graphic in nature. Okay. But I actually don't even want you to stop doing that. Just know that I like it to not be super frequent, and I might put the napkins container right in front of your plate or something like that, but I won't say anything about it. So I also have to be respectful of them too. I need to not be a jerk about it, and they need to not be a jerk about it, and they've been great. So, but that was not something I would have been pliable about in my early 20s. So my values around what's a deal breaker has changed over time too. And it's okay wherever you are. It would have been okay for me to say, I can't live with or share mouths with the person who's eating meat. And it's okay for me to say, like, you know what, my foundational things in the relationship are different than that now too.
Well, and I love with this question because it does say partner or partners. And so if you are in a consensually non-monogamous relationship, open to multiple partners, maybe your sexual incompatibility with one person means that you find that sexual compatibility with another partner.
Just outsource it to different folks a little bit at a time.
And I think, that's one of the beautiful pieces in the poly world is that there is a little less pressure to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And that can have a huge positive impact on getting rid of some anxieties and some guilt, and other anxieties and guilts may emerge. But at least knowing that, okay, I don't have to like everything this person likes, and that's not going to be the end of this relationship because we just recognize that in each other.
And if you like something that's statistically hard to find, whether that be a frequency amount or whether that be an activity, you might have to be more cool with finding bits and pieces with people and not having that perfect fit exist. And, you know, I say that as someone who teaches at kink events and lives a kink lifestyle, whatever that means. So I know that a lot of the things I like are statistically less common to find partners for. I don't know really how many people would like them if everybody felt like there wasn't taboo. We'll never know the answer to that, but it is hard to find people for. And so there's also like plenty of people, you know, I guess when I talk about not expecting to find that 100% match, I'm really more talking from my own experience. I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, you can get over the fear and the worry of that and the self-judgment of that if you have any of those feelings, and you know, recognize that you do the best with what you get.
Yeah. And you find your compatibilities within it. You know, maybe what you really thought you really loved ends up changing, and you love something else more. And
Or there's multiple ways to express it, and it turns out some of those have good overlap. Yeah.
So, I mean, my inclination in seeing this is never write off a relationship or a person because on the surface it immediately seems like an incompatibility. There's always lots of potential in there.
And I would do the opposite side a little bit and say, especially if you're newer in the relationship and it just doesn't, it feels like it's going to be more effort than it's worth, it's okay to not continue a relationship because of sexual incompatibility too.
But I mean, I'm a meat eater and Ruthie's a vegetarian, and somehow our friendship has survived.
We go out to dinner even. Yeah.
We do.
So
I'm probably going to be much more conscious of what I'm eating when...
Just lobster. All right, Thomas, thank you so much for being in my life and bringing your meaty ways into my life. And thank you for co-hosting this episode with me.
Oh, thank you, Ruthie, for being an amazing co-host and sharing this Valentine's Day radio show with me.
All right, you will hear from us. We will not see you at all in the next episode.